Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Rookie Pastors Podcast, a casual conversation about real ministry from real pastors. And believe it or not, the guys on the show today are real pastors. We are not AI generated.
It's hard to believe.
We actually exist. I'm hosting this episode. My name is Kyle Neiman, and I am here with Josh Prince and Dustin Slayton. Guys, how we doing?
Doing good. You know, this is just kind of funny. As soon as we started recording, I had a thing pop up that says actual recording is of higher quality. And I wonder if that's just talking about the video or what we actually say. It's like maybe what we actually say.
Video. No, it's just the video, man. Don't give yourself too much credit there.
Yeah, exactly.
But I'm glad to know that after you had a rough outing last episode.
Yeah, mine was terrible last week. Sorry about that to all of our YouTube watchers.
No, it all worked out. We got the message across there. All right, guys, I wanted to open up our conversation. The Texas State Fair has just closed. They wrapped up. Usually I'm able to make it out to the State Fair. Couldn't this year, but I enjoy going. And every year it's really for me about the food more than anything else. I don't spend money on rides or anything. So I want to know, what's your favorite fair food? It could be like carnival food or something like that. It doesn't have to be specifically from the State Fair, but that genre of food, what's your favorite?
Let me first say, I'm not surprised that Kyle Neiman had to ask us a food question.
It was either food or video games. That's just my thing.
It had to be something. I just like a corn dog. I mean, game for a funnel cake, all that kind of, like, obviously it's got to be fried. Like, that's the only thing that you get. I think safe bet for me is always going to be the corn dog. But I had a fried Oreo years ago that I still think about from time to time. And that was a wonderful adventure for me. So I don't know. Safe bet's the corn dog, but I can go to Sonic and get that. You can't go to Sonic and get a fried Oreo.
Oh, it's not quite the same at Sonic. It's not quite the same.
I mean,
I think, what about you?
Josh hit my 3 as well. I had the deep fried Oreo at the State Fair a few years back, because it's been a long time since we've been to the State Fair. Or any fair for that matter. But a good old funnel cake, and specifically at Texas State Fair, a Fletcher's corn dog. Yeah, that's like the epitome of corn dog quality. So yeah, that's pretty much where it lies for me as well.
You can get those from like the freezer section of H-E-B or Walmart.
Yeah, it's just not the same though. I mean, when you see them back there Fletcher's dipping it in the batter and then dipping it over in the oil, I mean, just the visual makes it taste so much better.
Dustin, I'm trying to get Kyle riled up.
It's all good.
I'll
be okay. I'm not passionate about anything.
If he knew that they actually deep fried double stuffed Oreos, then he might get riled up.
See, I don't know. That might be a whole different, because then you have enough breading to balance. Okay. Oh, okay. See, I'm about to get my soapbox again. Don't do this. Don't do this to me. I do love a deep fried Oreo. Deep fried Twinkies are ridiculous, but very fun. But my favorite like fried fair item is a churro. Like, I just love churros, whether it be at a fair or a theme park or whatever, Disneyland or whatever it is. I just love a good churro. That's one of my favorite things. They had at the State Fair, they had one place had a churro shake. So it was like a cinnamon dulce de leche shake and had a big old churro stuck in it and all these like toppings. That was pretty awesome. So
that sounds pretty incredible.
It was fantastic.
The insulation or shot that they gave you before or after.
Yeah. I don't remember all of it because I passed out. Sugar coma.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, that's good. Good to know. I always like to hear those things, and nothing controversial this time, like mega stuff Oreos or anything like that. So
tell you what, it's good stuff.
Well, speaking of big events, that's actually our topic for today, is talking about church events. You know, we do a lot of preparation throughout the week, preparing our sermons, meeting with people, working on the individual ministries of the church. But inevitably, every church is going to put together bigger events throughout the year. And so I'd like to hear from you guys as we get started on this conversation. Like, what are special events important? Like, why do they matter for the church's mission? And how do you decide what's worth doing?
So I was thinking on this, like the aspect that most events have one of two purposes, right? One is going to be an in-reach purpose as far as fellowshipping with one another, which is really important. That one another aspect, we're focusing on it as a church right now. how we greet one another and eat with one another, engage one another, all that kind of stuff is really important. And so in-reach events will give you that opportunity to be together as a family, which I think are highly valuable and necessary. The other ones obviously are outreach events where our focus is to interact with the lost or the unchurched, to serve them in some way, to have some type of an impact. So I think both obviously have an impact towards the mission of the church. And I would say, as far as deciding which ones are worth doing, I will first say this. I think you have to aim for equality of both. Like, I think that sometimes we'll get too focused on an in-reach aspect, all these fellowships we're doing with each other, and we forget that we're supposed to be serving outward as well. And so you need to aim for some equality as far as in-reach and outreach is concerned. But I think also we'll get into this as we move forward, but I think recognizing, like, what is the central focus? So one of the things I think sometimes we can do is we can say, well, this is an outreach event, but then inevitably what it becomes is just a bunch of church members hanging out with each other,
Right. Right.
forgetting to engage or forgetting to serve, whatever it might be. And so that's why I think that balance is important, because you do need to have those moments of engagement from one another aspect, but you've got to be recognizing those moments where you're focused out, where you're really doing things to engage community, to engage the lost, to engage the unchurched. So that's my 2 cents on that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that one of the important reasons for events is it's almost like a adrenaline shot to the church. If done well and if done for the right purposes, it can really get a church excited, because you
Sure.
see activity happening. We see worship happening, preaching happening, Bible study happening, and all that kind of stuff. And there are certain aspects of outreach, especially if you want to think about outreach events. There's certain elements of outreach happening throughout the week, whether it's personal evangelism or if your church still does visitation, things like that. But there's something about a big event brings everybody together, brings everybody out, and you see ministry taking place. And so that may be Vacation Bible School is just a big event. Or it could be like we have Fall Festival coming up, kind of a trunk or treat, a Fall Festival hybrid we have coming up here at the end of next week. And so it's something that people see the church doing. They get excited. They get excited seeing new people on the property. And I think whenever you think about the question, how do you decide which ones are worth doing? Really, the first part of the question answers that. Which one of those fulfills some part of your mission?
Right.
Whether it's that community connection mission or evangelistic or service, whatever the case may be, there's certain elements of the church that we want to be able to, process through and make sure we're completing, we're accomplishing. And so do these events accomplish a part of that mission? If you're doing an event just because we've done it for 20 years, well, then it may be a time to reevaluate, see if it's really worth doing.
Yeah.
But, if it accomplishes the mission, if it brings the church together, if it gets them excited about what the church is doing, who the church is, I think that is a good litmus test.
Yeah, and that's a really good point there, Dustin, because there are so many things, especially in a revitalization context, which many of us are in, but any church that's been around for a while, when we have these events, like, well, that's just what we've always done. That is not a reason to continue doing it. They always have to be evaluated. We'll talk about evaluating events here in a bit as part of the process. I do want to go back to something you said, Josh. You were talking about having this balance of the outreach versus the in-reach kind of events. When you say balance, do you mean by quantity of events, like 5 of this, 5 of that, or whatever, or do you also mean the financial investment in those?
I mean, I think it depends, because, like, if you were to take VBS, for instance, right? We recognize that VBS is both an inward and an outward, right? We're going to
Right.
minister to our kids, and we're going to minister outward to kids who are unconnected in some way. So, I mean, there's a balance that naturally happens with that. So that's an aspect of balance that you can think through, is these events that are actually dual purposed, are always good. I think for us, I would say, like, financially, regarding that question, I don't know if they're always going to be the same,
Mm-hmm.
because we found a rhythm with some events for us as a church that honestly, it doesn't cost us a lot more than just the service hours that we put in. It's smaller money up front, but a larger impact as far as engagement with the community. But, like, we have a big event coming up this week in which, we're putting And it's a unique one because it's our church anniversary. But right, we've put several $1,000s into it because it's a unique opportunity for us to celebrate. So I don't think you can apples to apples financially.
Mhm.
I'd say quality and quantity is probably a pretty good comparison because once again, I think if you can measure it out to almost the same degree we're doing inreach, we're doing outreach. I think that keeps a really healthy aspect. Like one of our desires with our small groups in the days to come is to help them figure out a balance of fellowship and service. And so our encouragement to our small groups is, hey, once a month, serve a need together on campus, off campus, a neighbor, whatever it might be, serve a need together. And then the next month, fellowship together, right? Spend time with each
Sure.
other, just laughing, all that kind of stuff. And so within that model, I think you can follow that model in the church, try to spread it out, obviously a little bit more. But yeah, I think quality, quantity wise, you can apple to apple and it would be a healthy rhythm for the church.
That's really good. And I think the reason I asked that question, and it's gonna lean into the next question, is when we look at our budget for events over the year, I think it's important to really understand that meaning, because where those dollars are going, if all your events are heavily balanced towards your in reach, like fellowship and connecting, while that's good, if you have more funds going to that, it starts to kind of make you wonder, are we putting that investment into going out and doing? Is that showing in the stewardship of our funds as well? And like you said, yeah, there's going to be special events at the church, like an anniversary. It's a big deal talking about the legacy and honoring the legacy of the church that may skew that one way or another. But I think even how we budget to start the year gets our brain moving and how we can plan. With that as a transition here, what's your process for planning some of the bigger events that your church has in a year?
Well, I'm interested to hear what you guys say because when you sent this question, I was like, "Oh no, what is our process for
Yeah.
planning a big event?" But we have quite a few staff members, and so like for specific events, Vacation Bible School or something like that, or a specific outreach type event that falls under somebody's ministry area, they kind of take the leadership of planning that, putting together their team. For things that we've had that are more like church wide, like when we had our 175th a couple weeks ago, a couple years ago, things like that. We usually just kind of find a point person on the staff team to coordinate, build a team together that could include some staff, but also volunteers. Come up with a plan, come up with needs, a list of items that are going to have to take place, a budget, and all that kind of stuff. Hopefully, it's something that's already budgeted. If not, then we have to go and make that request to stewardship and do that far enough in advance that we know what we need. And so we kind of approach things from like that, just that build a team, let them flesh out what is needed. A small example is right now we've got one of our staff members retiring, and so we're planning a party. And I know that's a really small deal, but it's an event with the church. And so, we've got a staff member who is leading that, building a team, figuring out what all is needed, and they'll just carry it out. And so that's usually how we do it. Just kind of assign a team, let them run with it.
So for me, I would say a big question that I'm asking about a lot of things right now in the church, and I'm going to start extending it more to our events. So this is not something we've practiced before. It's something that I want us to begin to practice, is asking and figuring out what is the purpose of this event, right? We should ask that about things constantly. Like, what is the purpose of this committee? What's the purpose of this team? What's the purpose of this position? I think we can ask the same question of the event. What is the purpose of the event? And I think when you can figure out the purpose, it's going to motivate things, it's going to organize things and people and all that kind of stuff. And it's going to set a clear parameter on like, what is the goal of this event? And so I think especially when you're saying planning big events, like just doing the big to do the big doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be helpful or productive, right? Like, I mean, we've been part of churches who do these big things, but it's not actually productive, whether it be the fact
Right.
that, people are not engaged and encouraged by it anymore, or it's exhausting, which I think is a big thing that you have to figure out in the process too, is this actually something that we can handle? Like, can we actually pull this thing off? Because I think a lot of times, like, we're real hopeful. Like, this is gonna be a huge event. Like, a couple of years ago, the city reached out to us and asked if we could come and manage the bounce houses for this big fall event. And I was like, yeah, we got this. Oh my gosh, we did not got that. It was rough. And
We
like
did not got that.
our people were exhausted. I mean, it was like clear. They said we don't ever want to do that. again, we want to find ways we can serve. And so I think the allure of big, like we all get that, but is it actually beneficial? Is it going to pay dividends that are good for your people? Like, cause you could walk away from a big event and your people are, or you or your staff are highly discouraged. So what's the purpose of it? Can we pull it off? And then I think to Dustin's point is like, who are the people that we can bring along to pull this thing off? Because I think if we put it on our staff over and over again, right, we're going to wear out our staff, we're going to wear out ourselves, and our people are just going to begin to think, well, ministry's for the professional. So I think part of the process too is who are the contributors that we can bring to the table who can really help this thing be productive and beneficial for whatever our investment is.
That's great insight, guys. One of the things that we do is, planning these big events starts with really looking at your whole year. So our staff does two big calendaring meetings a year. And when we do that, we look at the whole year ahead of us, a whole 12 months, but the next 6 months is we kind of write in pen, and the following 6 months we write in pencil. And that's kind of how we talk about it. And we have this queue, or I kind of lead them in this queue of like, okay, we've hit the 6-month mark. The rest of this is in pencil. This is dreaming. This is kind of getting on our radar, but we're going to focus a lot more on the details for these next 6 months. And so when you do a big calendaring meeting where you're looking at your entire calendar, you can see, okay, we have VBS, or we have, this big city event going on here. And that allows you to balance out your schedule, not just with understanding what's a fellowship kind of internal event versus an outreach event, but also, making sure you're not putting these big events close together. You're talking about wearing out your staff, wearing out your people. You put these events too close together, they're like, I'm kind of burned out. That's too much. And, we've run into that, people just not showing up for the next event, even though we needed them there because they'd already done, too many things in a week or too many things in a month. So I think it starts with looking at your whole calendar. And then I agree with you, Dustin. Our next step with that is, okay, who's in charge of these things? And all along the way, we're constantly asking that question, like you were saying, Josh, of like, what's the purpose of this? And we take our vision and we keep repeating that. So for our church, we want to be a family for the community. So how is this promoting us being family within our community as a city and within our community here? How does it promote these different aspects of what family is? And if we're not seeing those checked off, then we set that aside and we say, is this event worth doing? Is it worth our resources? Is it worth our energy? If it's not aligned with our vision, the answer is often no. We can do something else that's going to be better aligned with that. So for us, it all starts with that big calendaring meeting, then making sure those events are in vision, and then who's the person? A lot of documents we use when we're planning an event, and so I'll get that to you to make sure we have that in our show notes, because I would like to share that. And it's nothing I made, it's stuff that I found by just going online and being like, church event planning, and see what's there. And tons of churches have shared those resources,
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of good stuff, and you don't have to follow it exactly, but understand there's resources out there that can help you be more organized with these planning and following up on events as well. So, and I think following up on events is a really important thing, because sometimes we get in our head that event went good enough when maybe we're glossing over some of the things that went really wrong. And so the next thing I want to talk about is what are some mistakes we make when we're planning events, and what can we do to avoid those?
So y'all have actually mentioned a couple of things that I thought of kind of going into the episode. I think first off is it's too much for us. So we made that mistake actually this year. The city of Cedar Hill, we're right in the downtown area where they put on a few major events in October into December. And so it's like, it's bang, bang, like first of the month, end of the month in October, and then 1st of December. And so I was like, they're bringing all these people here. We've got to get out there. So I added an event back in that we had removed. And I remembered as we were doing it, why we removed it. It's a great opportunity. But when I'm looking at the potential impact we have with the other two events, and now I've asked people to volunteer for something, and it competes with the other opportunities they have to serve, like that wasn't wise on my part. So I think too much, like we need to prioritize what is best, and we need to learn like to say no, even to good things. It's okay to say no to good things. I think sometimes the mistakes is we see an opportunity and we just kind of leech onto it. We're just, bright eyed and hopeful in a way that we shouldn't be. I think the other thing, and I think this was Dustin who said it, is we just keep doing something because we've always done it, right? And that's never a good argument for why we should keep on doing something. And so sometimes we're doing stuff that is super lame or super dated, right? Now, I understand that, for some people, puppet ministry is still highly productive, but like, right, if you're ripping out the puppets I just, no, I
Brian's
can't, but like,
calls
there's
and
like
bells.
certain things that we do
Stop.
that besides puppet ministry. I'm sorry if you're really passionate about puppets. My bad for stepping on your toes. But I think that sometimes we just get in that routine of doing something. And, like I'm looking at an event we're about to do for the fourth time, and we've changed the format. And so the new format we're in, we've been doing for 4 years now. And I'm beginning to say, okay, let's not get in the routine of doing the same thing we've done every single time. And I think that's what we do is we said, well, it was productive, it worked, and so we'll just keep doing it until it doesn't. Well, no, like one of the cool things you can do is push the boundaries and figure out like what's a new way to engage, what's a new way to challenge. And so I think the biggest mistake, honestly, a lot of churches are making, we're just continuing to do something. We're just beating a dead horse, and it's not necessarily helping anybody.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point, Josh. One of the questions that I asked our staff at our staff retreat this year is, what is a ministry or an event within your ministry that has been successful, but still either needs a major surgery or needs to be buried? What is something that needs to be tweaked and we're just doing it just because we've been doing it for a long time? That's a hard conversation to have, but I think it's an important one. One of the ones, Kyle, that you kind of hinted at earlier that I think is a mistake a lot of churches make is just piling them in too much all at once. I think both of you guys have actually hit on this because it burns out your volunteers, especially if you've got a church where you kind of follow that standard rule within churches where 20% of the people do 80% of the work. That kind of idea. You're using the same people over and over again. So within our church rhythm, we have a ridiculously busy last 2 months of the year. From Fall Festival on October 31st through Christmas Eve, we have a major or semi-major event every other weekend within our church. And there's some of them are outreach, some of them are internal, but it's a consistent rhythm. And there's been some of those things that have been kind of on that conversation list of like, okay, is this something that needs to continue, or is this just a we do it because we do it kind of thing? But they're within different ministries, different focuses, different groups within the community that each one of them is hitting. And so it's hard to let go of each one of those. And so we basically don't plan anything in January or February. So pretty much January is off limits. It's just hit pause. Our men's ministry has a retreat in February. That's usually, and maybe a disciple now for the youth in February. That's usually the first thing that we really begin to get back into in the rhythm of the new year. And so, if a church is just back to back to back to back with events, you are going to eventually just burn your people out. And then you're going to get to that next event and nobody's going to show up. And so really thinking about your timing. And if you do spot a time on the calendar, like maybe summer when things are really busy, work in some pauses for your church as a whole so that they have time to rest.
Yeah, that's good.
One thing you kind of popped in my head when you first started talking, Dustin, was looking back. I think sometimes we don't let that be part of the process of looking back and remembering, because one of the practices, and I'm inconsistent with it, but it started when a church I used to work at, right, wrong, missing, confused. So we look at an event and that's how we review it. What was right, what went right, what was wrong, what was missing, what was confusing about it. And I think sometimes we'll take that process of considering those things. And then when we come back to the event a year later, well, that's gone beyond our purview. Like we've forgotten about those aspects. And so maybe we're saying no to or saying yes to an event that last time we said, maybe we shouldn't do this anymore. Or we're about to set ourselves up to make the same mistakes and failures that we did the year before because we haven't actually taken our process of, thinking in the shadow of the event and now applying it before we get back into it again. So y'all have talked about kind of that analyzing aspect.
Yeah.
It's good, but it doesn't do you any good if you're not actually going to come back and put it into the work of planning a new event or getting back into an event you've already done.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. You took the words right out of my mouth. I'm glad that we're covering this because I would lead these evaluation meetings after an event, and we'd feel good that we did our due diligence in evaluating and talking about the mistakes. And then we'd get to the event and the same mistakes would happen. And we'd realize we talked about this last year. We didn't address it. And so I started with those calendar meetings. I started in the same kind of notes for those meetings. I put the notes from all the event evaluations, and I'd just be like, all right, this event's coming up. These this went well. This is what was broken. What are we doing to kind of fix those things? Let's get those on your radar. Don't need an answer today, but I want this addressed when we get close to the event. That's such an important piece of, you know, even when an event is successful. And in fact, I think you were kind of saying something along this lines, Josh. I mean, just when an event is successful, it does not mean it is exempt from evaluation or critique. In fact, those are the ones we should be really excited about tweaking the next year because they have faith from people in the previous year that are going to overlook some of the hiccups when you change things. It's the events that were maybe a little rocky that you need to keep doing. Those are the ones that you need to maybe kind of, okay, let's not rock the boat too much. Let's just make sure we get this right. The big successful events and stuff like that, man, change things up. Try new things. People trust you. Try something that's a little bit crazy. There's nothing wrong with that. And so when we're evaluating events, I think we've talked about this a lot on the purpose of it. But how do we make sure that an event is leaving that ministerial impact? How do we do that?
I think as a part of that evaluation process is just asking ourselves, did this fulfill the purpose that we wanted it to fulfill?
Yep.
Were we hoping to have community engagement, but what we saw is our church members just standing around talking to each other, while the community walked around them and did all the activities and all the games or whatever the case may be, but we didn't really engage. And so figure out, okay, well, did it serve its actual specific purpose? And if it didn't, this is part of the evaluation process you're talking about. If it didn't, what do we need to tweak next year to make sure that happens? The evaluation process, I feel like, is one of the things that we probably do the worst whenever we think about planning an event, because it's hard to look at, across the table and be like, you know what? I know this was your event, and then give some critiques. We have to be willing as fellow members, fellow ministers, co-laborers together, we have to be willing to take those critiques and not take them personal, but understand that this is just one way that they're trying to help me to improve. And so hopefully, just like any other tool, you get better at it as time goes by, and that ministerial impact just continue to increase over time.
Yeah, I would rewrite, just kind of what we said earlier in regards to determining the purpose. Maybe a little extra aspect of it would be determine how will this event be a blessing to those who participate. So then your measure of success or measure of impact is, did we actually bless in that way? Were we a blessing to our people? Were we a blessing to those that we were ministering to? We tried to add a prayer element into an outreach event. And we knew that it wouldn't be wildly successful, but we did have probably 25 people who filled out a prayer request card. Several of those people allowed our people to pray with them. And then we got to share those prayer requests with our prayer team, who I said, hey, just throughout this week, next week, will you pray over these items that somebody shared with us? And so I think that, there's a great blessing, a simple blessing within that was great to challenge our people with, because now they're having to pray out loud. There's an evangelism aspect to that piece. And so it was a blessing to them to be able to minister in that way. And then we got to minister, we got to bless somebody through that ministry. So I think if you figure out, how am I going to bless someone through this thing, and then determine at the end, did we actually bless people? Then that's a good way to grade it.
Yeah, I think what we're hitting on there is, it's one thing if we in the planning process say, well, this is how it aligns with a vision, but are we practicing that? Are we putting the elements in place for it to be very obvious how we are ministering to people through this event? We can't just assume people are just going to get it. I think we have to cast the vision for an event as well. Like what's the heartbeat of this? Tell that story before and after the event. Help them see what you as a pastor saw happening at the event. So for VBS, it's really easy to be like, man, we had 30 kids here, 50 kids here, 100 kids here. They were all worshiping the Lord. It was awesome. Blah, blah, blah. Thank you so much for your prayers. But if we can turn that into a story to say, man, I got to see one kid interacting with this one leader, and it just showed how meaningful it was to have this adult interaction showing this love and compassion for these kids. That's why we do this, so kids have a safe place to know that this church family is for them. That's just like an example, just off the top of my head, right? But what we're doing when we tell the story that way is we're making sure people understand that ministry impact after the fact, so that the next time around, we can cast the vision for the ministerial impact of the event so that they're working towards that when they're there. And I even think, you were saying, Dustin, when we're evaluating an event, we see people just sitting around, not, chatting, not really doing the outreach aspect. I think it's important to speak into that in the moment, going as a pastor, going up to those people like, hey, we cast this vision as being an outreach event. Can you help me out? Can y'all make sure we're going and save these conversations for later? Let's make sure we're talking with people in the community.
Mm-hmm. That's good.
Not being afraid to pastor people in that moment and tell them what's expected of them. I've found people go, oh yeah, you're right. Yeah, no problem. You really get pushback, because people want to be a part of that story. So asking people to do that. And also when we're evaluating events, not just asking our leadership, how did it go? Asking our people, how did it go? Because they might have a different perspective than our leadership had. All of that allows us to really build events that have that ministerial impact. I'll just share one story before we wrap up. Was our fall festival every year was, a trunk or treat with a couple games and stuff like that. And we were noticing, families that night would come in, they'd hit all the spots and they'd go. And we know we were able to show them kindness. We were able to give them a safe place for their kids. And that was a primary of the event. But we're like, man, we're not doing any ministry outside of just this external kind of fellowship. And so what we did was we had a craft table for one of our fall festivals where the kids could put together bead bracelets. And we knew as a kid's putting together a bead bracelet, that takes more than 10 seconds. It's going to take them a little bit of time. So we knew there were going to be parents standing around. And so we intentionally put people in that room to be our prayer ministers. And they walked around with these cards, and the cards just had 2 questions on them. Say, hey, can you fill this out? Question number 1 was, what concerns do you have with our community, our city? And what do you need prayer for? And so they would take that and then they would say, can I talk to you about this? And like, sure. And so they just strike up a conversation. And that did 2 things for us. One, it told us where the hurts are in our city, like where people are seeing crime as an issue. People are seeing fatherlessness as an issue. People are seeing these different issues. We want to start leaning into addressing those needs as a church, but it also opened up this conversation to pray for people in that moment. And our volunteers walked away from that going, that was awesome. Mm-hmm. We got to do real ministry at this event that's always been, let's just play games and hand out candy. Yeah. It changed everything. So now people want to invest candy donations or anything because they want to see more of that ministerial impact, all because we took a craft station and said, let's not make it about bracelets. Let's make it about, meeting people and understanding their needs and desires and inviting them on a spiritual journey with us, even in those 10 minutes. So.
Yeah, that's good. One thing that you mentioned was talking about stories. And I think that's one of the things that we probably that I know we as a staff are learning more about that at our own church. But I think we as pastors, we're so vision focused and forward focused that oftentimes we plan up to an event and the event happens. We're like, yeah, that was great. And then we're just on to the next thing. Right. And we forget to share the impact. And I think it's also important for us to remember that we don't just share the story that Sunday after, or maybe 2 Sundays after, but those stories are going to continue to come up, hopefully. Like, for example, we just had 2 baptisms in the last couple of weeks. Both of them, little guys in the kids ministry. One of them tied back to Vacation Bible School. One of them tied back to our WindShape, preteen kind of young kids camp that we host here. And so we're able to tie all the way back and say, hey, this event that, we did that took this many volunteers, took this much money and all this kind of stuff. This is one of the outflows of that. And, kind of tell that story. Whenever we've had people join the church because they came to an event and then started attending the church, and then 6 months later, they joined the church or something like that. We try to tell that story with as oftentimes as we get a chance to, just say, hey, this Christmas event led to these people finding a church that they wanted to be a part of, because hey, we want to be a part of a church that does something like this, and then now has led to them getting plugged in and becoming a leader of some kind. And so continue to tell those stories, not just a couple of weeks after, but even on down the road. How does this person's change or adaptation or growth right now tie back to some event that we had as a church?
That's awesome. Well, guys, thank you for just the incredible discussion around events. I think this is something that every pastor is going to have to deal with. It's really an ongoing conversation. Remember, if you're listening to this, there are lots of resources you can find on other churches want to help with this and want to share those resources, and we want to share what little wisdom we have with you guys as well. So I really hope this has been helpful. Join in on our social media. You can follow us on all the social media platforms at Rookie Pastors Pod. Except for X, it's just Rookie Pastors. And so give us a follow on all those. Make sure you check in with us, send us a comment or write us a review. We love seeing just the other pastors, other ministry leaders who are finding this helpful. So make sure you connect with us. But until next week, thank you for listening, and hope you have a wonderful week.